Good morning and happy holidays. My name is Rory Haggerty. I did my last presentation on the sport of rugby, so it's only fitting to talk about the Rugby World Cup. So hopefully I'll be teaching you guys a little something this early in the morning. With the threat of professional rugby threatening the amateur game, the nations of Australia and New Zealand decided it was time to settle the, quote, world's best debate on the field. In 1983, the Australian and New Zealand rugby unions wrote the proposal for Rugby World Cup to the International Rugby Board. It wasn't until 1985 in Paris that the board reviewed and voted on the proposal. The board decided to give the green light to New Zealand and Australia with a 6-2 decision. Ireland and Scotland were against the tournament, arguing that it would ruin the integrity of amateurism. The board voted that the tournament would be hosted in 1987. 2 years on from the voting of the tournament, the first Rugby World Cup was hosted by Australia and New Zealand. It was a huge success. In 1991, the International Rugby Board decided that there would be a Women's World Cup. The first Women's World Cup was won by yours truly, the United States. If you watched the movie Invictus starring Matt Damon and Morgan Freeman, you would understand how influential the 1995 Rugby World Cup was. At the time, Nelson Mandela was trying his best to heal the nation of South Africa. Mandela used the game of rugby to bring the nation together. I'll talk about the 1995 World Cup later on. 2019 was a huge influential year for World Rugby. Not only was the World Cup to be hosted in Japan, but it was also the first time that Rugby World Cup of this magnitude was hosted on Asian soil. It was also huge strides in the women's game. World Rugby decided to take out the title Women's and Women's Rugby World Cup to put a non-gender binary title on the cup. The philosophy was to increase eyes. When you type into Google Rugby World Cup, you'll see Rugby World Cup 21, which is the women's tournament. It was a class move by World Rugby to put male and female rugby players on the same level. So now let's talk about the tournament. Rugby World Cup is played once every 4 years. Rugby World Cup is played in years offsetting the Olympics and FIFA World Cup. The philosophy was that Rugby World Cup did not and does not want to compete with those huge markets. It is beneficial because if you combine the 4 events, including the Winter and Summer Olympics, the FIFA World Cup, you would have a pretty huge global event once every year. Like the FIFA World Cup, Rugby World Cup is broken into pools. There are four pools of 5 teams. The pool stage consists of a round-robin tournament with the top 2 teams qualifying for the knockout stage. Unlike the FIFA World Cup, Rugby World Cup dives right into the quarterfinals. In FIFA, you have the round of 16 before you get into the knockout, semifinals, etc., etc. Like FIFA, there's a final for the gold and a third place for the bronze. The tournament is usually 6 weeks long, played during the fall months. Rugby World Cup 2019 was played between September 20 and November 2nd. As I mentioned before, Rugby World Cup did not want to compete with the likes of the Olympics and FIFA World Cup, which makes it the 3rd largest event. So how do you qualify? How do you get into the tournament? It's actually pretty simple. The top 3 teams in each pool automatically qualify for the next World Cup. Teams 4 and 5 are determined through regional qualifications. Winner of the Oceania, Asia, and African tournaments qualify for World Cup. In 2019, Tonga qualified under Oceania, while Namibia qualified through Africa. Japan hosted, so they were automatically qualified through Asia. The Americas and Europe both sent 2 teams respectively. In America, Uruguay and the United States represented the Americas, while Georgia and Russia represented Europe. The last qualifier is played in a one-off playoff. For 2019, Samoa beat out Germany to punch the last ticket to Japan. 2 years before kickoff, World Rugby gets together in a lottery system to determine a lottery system vote, similar to that of the NBA and the NHL. The pools are selected at random. The pool draw for Rugby World Cup 23 is scheduled for Monday, December 14th. I'll personally be looking for where Ireland winds up. So location. As I mentioned before, Rugby World Cup is played once every 4 years. A few milestones with respect to the location, most notably is 1995. As mentioned before, South Africa was forbidden from the first two World Cups due to its domestic political system. In 1995, Nelson Mandela fought to have Rugby World Cup played in South Africa. He succeeded. In 2019, Japan hosted Rugby World Cup. The tournament marked the first time World Rugby played a tournament of this magnitude on Asian soil. In 2023, France won the bidding to host, beating out the likes of South Africa and Ireland. The location for Rugby World Cup 27 and 2031 is projected to be revealed in May of 22. For 2027, Russia and Australia are the favorites. As we know, Russia hosted 2018 FIFA World Cup, so they already have the infrastructure. As you can see, Australia has hosted before, so they too have the infrastructure. In 2031, the United States rugby community is pushing to have Rugby World Cup 31 hosted on American soil. For the females, as you can see, Rugby World Cup is played once every 4 years. It usually offsets the male Rugby World Cup, so you'll have a Rugby World Cup once every 2 years in retrospect. Next year, the tournament is going to be hosted in New Zealand. So winners, because that's what we care about. In 2011, New Zealand won their first Rugby World Cup in 24 years on New Zealand soil. Rich McCaw and New Zealand ran it back in 2015. They are the first and only team to successfully defend the Webb Ellis Trophy. Against all odds, both political and team, Francois Pienaar brought the South African nation and the Springboks together to win the 1995 World Cup. The 95 final is the only final to go into overtime. The Springboks beat out New Zealand at the 82nd minute by a score of 15-12. South Africa would win again in 2007 and 2019. 2019 was one of the most influential years for the South African team. Siya Kolisi, the captain here holding the Webb Ellis Cup, was the first Springbok captain to lead the team in a World Cup championship. Australia has won in 91 and 99, both respectively, while England is the only Northern Hemisphere team when they won in 03. On the females front, you can see that New Zealand is the fourth dominant team in the world. Next year, they might run into some trouble with England, but we will see. So, crunching the numbers, because that's what we're here for. Logistically, the tournament is huge. Each team must submit a 31-man roster prior to leaving their respective countries, not to mention support staff, including coaches and medical staff. The teams are allowed injury replacements, so say one player tears his ACL or medically disqualifies him for the rest of the tournament, the team can bring another player in. 2019 is referred to as the most successful Rugby World Cup to date. Of this, 1.84 million tickets were sold, while 1.13 million fans made their way through the fan zones throughout Japan. 400,000 people flocked their way to Japan internationally to watch the tournament. There was just over 70,000 at the World Cup final. If you compare that to the 2002 FIFA World Cup final hosted in Japan and South Korea, the final was actually taking place in the same stadium, Yokohama International Stadium. The attendance for that game was just over 69,000. So on the terms of media, different countries have different media coverages. In the United States, last year we had NBCSN had the broadcasting rights, while Ireland and England both had RTE and Sky Sports respectively. The media outlets around the world allowed Rugby World Cup to be the most watched World Cup to date. 54.8 million Japanese individuals turned in to watch their Brave Blossoms upset Scotland in the pool stage. It was a Japanese record which would rank in the top 5 on a global television viewership for year ending 2019. On the global scale, there was a 5% increase in viewership from Rugby World Cup 2015 to 2019. Viewership from the Rugby World Cup final increased 85% from the final in 15 to 19. These are huge numbers for a tournament, which if you take into account the time difference between the likes of Japan and Western Europe. The tournament was a huge success in terms of emerging markets. The likes of Germany and Southeast Asia tuned in to watch the tournament as well. Germany actually accounted for 10.82 million viewers, which ranked 7th around the world, while Southeast Asia ranked in the top 20. With a tournament and event of this magnitude, we care about what the impact's on after the tournament. World Rugby was extremely pleased with the success of Rugby World Cup 2019. Economically, the tournament added 2.3 billion pounds, which is about 437 billion yen to the Japanese GDP. There was also a huge increase in operating profit for World Rugby. Operating profit increased 15 million pounds from 2015 to 2019. Going back to the Japanese economy, the tournament added 46,000 jobs as well as 13,000 volunteer opportunities. The average fan would stay in Japan for 17 days to watch the tournament, which obviously increased revenue for Japanese industries. With the huge success of the tournament, World Rugby donated 2 million pounds to the Child Fund Passive Back Foundation. The foundation supports the growth of rugby in underdeveloped nations. Due to Rugby World Cup being on an Asian continent, interest in rugby grew substantially. In Asian markets, rugby interest, especially in women, are up 45%, with that of 27% in emerging markets. On an international scale, interest in rugby is up 63%. As mentioned, the tournament in Japan helped increase the interest in rugby, which is currently up 138%. Rugby World Cup 2019 would not be possible would not be successful, as it were, without the help of global partners. Some of the global partners include DHL, MasterCard, Land Rover, Societe Generale, Heineken, and Emirates. If you wanted to purchase any Rugby World Cup merchandise, IMG had the merchandising rights for the tournament. I hope I taught you guys a little something about Rugby World Cup, and hopefully you guys will tune in to watch Rugby World Cup 23 in France. If you guys have any questions, I will be answering them as soon as I can. Thank you, happy holidays, and stay safe. And here are my sources.